and welcome back to the second segment of our show. We have been joined by Antonio Beardall, who's an archaeologist. And of course, our topic, as we mentioned prior to the commercial break, is a discussion on the upcoming Belize Archaeology Symposium. Good morning, Mr.
Good
Beardall.
morning.
And welcome.
It's good to be back.
Okay. So, of course, we are getting ready for the Archaeology Symposium.
Yeah.
And this would be the what year that we're celebrating?
This is the 16th installment.
16th already.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about the purpose of the symposium itself.
Well, the purpose is to show the public, to talk to the public about what is going on in archaeology in Belize. A lot of times people ask us, okay, people come to dig and then what? What happens to the information? What happens to the artifacts? So every year we have a symposium where all of the researchers come together and in one venue give us the latest findings from whatever project they're working on. We invite tour guides especially because this enhances their work.
Yeah.
But we also invite students to come and learn, the public in general, anyone who has an interest to come to see what's out there, but also to challenge, also to educate themselves, to ask questions, to meet these people and find out what's going on.
Yeah. Now, it is also, you know, I like that the tour guides are included, obviously, because they'll be out there imparting the information. But it's also that the general public can participate as well. And you get the opportunity to have people really get an understanding of the work that's ongoing. What's on the lineup this year?
Well, this year, the major topic is looking at the formative years of the Maya and also all the way through to the post-classic in the Belize Valley, in central Belize. So that is the major theme, but we also allow other papers to be presented just based on their own projects, what they're finding. So not because we're focusing on central Belize means that people from the north can't do what they're doing. It's just that we want the people who work in central Belize to stick within this theme.
Yeah.
So they can use their research to prove or disprove ideas of how the Maya became the Maya from very early on and what happened to them afterwards. Because there's still a lot of misconceptions out there about what happened. All the Maya disappeared or collapsed at the same time, or the Maya didn't become as great until the classic period, whereas we know that these things are not true for every single site.
Yeah. So tell us, you know, what are we learning new about the Maya civilization in Belize through our archaeology research?
What we're learning, I think, is that the classic Maya, in a sense, began a lot earlier than we thought. People are thinking 250, 300 AD, that's when they really became who they were in terms of being classic. But we know that hundreds of years before that, they already had art, they already had tall buildings. We know that they had a complex trade system. We know that they were already exchanging ceramics and goods with other Maya groups who lived hundreds and hundreds of miles away.
Yeah.
But we're learning this through the new archaeology that is happening, and it's happening even on the microscopic level where people are finding out, okay, at this one given Maya site, this was the market area. And they can tell this by analyzing soil at a microscopic level. So we are learning new things.
But how does the soil tell you it was a marketplace?
Well, you can look at one given area, for example, and say, okay, in this one area, they used to sell this, this, and this. Or in this one area, this was a workshop that produced this, this, and this. It's still something new, and it's a model that is being formed right here in Belize, and I do believe that based on some of the research going on, especially in sites in Cayo, the other people will begin to examine, okay, well, if she found this in this plaza, let's look at the plaza here at Cajalpet and see if we're getting the same things in the soil as well.
Let's go back a bit. And I'm still trying to get some clarity with respect of the tour guides and tour operators participating in such a symposium. Simply because oftentimes when you see tour guides in action, they're not necessarily going into specific details with regards to things that they may be pointing out. So for instance, if someone goes to St. Antonich on a tour, the tour guide doesn't necessarily go down to the nitty-gritty, as you would call it, in terms of explaining, for instance, the writings, for instance, certain artifacts that may have been recovered from those sites and what have you. How does this now aid in allowing these people to be able to impart more precise information with respect of any sites or any topic that they're talking about from an archaeological point of view?
Well, one of the things that people don't understand is archaeology in Belize, it hasn't stopped. So the information that you have from Shanantanich from 10 years ago may not apply today because we have something that is enhanced or something that has disproven that particular theory. Every year when we have the symposium, we also release a volume of all the papers from the previous year. So the tour guides must take it upon themselves to learn all the new material. We have it ready for them. And I know that the Kaya Tour Guide Association, for example, they meet every week and they look at all the new information coming out and they discuss amongst themselves what is relevant, what is not to giving tours. I mean, if you're going to give a tour at Shanantanich, for example, you may not want to talk about the chemistry of the soil, for example, because this may go over the heads of a lot of people. But for example, there was a room found at Shanantanich a couple of years ago. There was that new tomb that was discovered there. And we now have the data to back these things up, who that person was, what do the glyph panels say, what was in this room that was covered in graffiti. The room might not be open for tourism, but they can point it out and say, this was in there. We have the images in articles that are published. They can show these things. So the information is evolving all the time. Even if some of the structures may be reburied at the end of the season for the safety of the public and the structure, but the information is there.
Now, you're taking me back to a conversation. We had a Cairo tour guide who came in who's teaching glyphs to students, which is just fascinating. Jorge,
Yeah.
And I remember sharing in that, where in visiting other Maya sites in Central America, the tour guides are amazing at being able to even tell you what the glyphs are saying as you walk past them. And so I would imagine in having your tour guides participate in the symposium that their knowledge and therefore their tours just become richer.
It does.
In really understanding what's happening in each specific area. But going back to some of the work that has been presented in the past, what do you find to be some of the areas that there really has to be more work done in being able to understand the landscape of the Mayans in Belize?
I think one of the areas that is lacking, once again, is going back to looking at the market areas, for example. Everyone likes the whole, okay, these are big structures and there's hieroglyphics. People like the romance and the mystery, yes, and the gore and the blood. But what is lacking is also looking at the simple everyday lives of these people. And there's been a lot of work being done on that in recent years. But what people come here for is still that mystery and that romance. And some of them may not want to know the everyday lives of these people. So that is something that we still have to show that these things are important, because what the people did in everyday life was also important to the growth and decline of any major city. So we still need to look at these things, where these people lived, how they worshipped. We're looking at not just having an elite class and a lower class, but some sites having the emergence of a middle class. How did they become middle class? How did they survive? What did they do that was different? So these are some of the things that we still have to continuously look at.
I noticed you brought some samples for us. Tell us, what do we have here?
Well,
are these what they traded?
These are what they traded. All of these are PNKs. That means we don't know what site they came from, because these are
PNKs?
Provenience not known.
Okay.
These were confiscated from people trying to sell them or people who donated them to us. But we use these as educational tools to show that the Maya also liked to bling. These are jade air flares worn by people who could afford jade in the first place, men and women.
And I can't sample it because you're wearing gloves. I can't touch it, right?
Well, if we get your ears pierced, then we'll see what we can do. And then shell beads that they wore on necklaces, anklets, and also bracelets. Yeah. Now, what this shows us is that if these items were found in Belize, we know that Belize doesn't have jade as any kind of organic rock. You don't find it here. Yeah. And it comes all the way from Guatemala. And that is, it's quite far away.
Yeah.
So we had to trade these things. And if we find these shell beads all the way inland, these shells come from the coast. So we know that they had long distance trade going on. I mean, we found things like stingray spines, even shark teeth all the way in sites inland. And how did it get there? We didn't have any zero ocean there at that time, but we know that people who lived there were getting these items, and we're talking in some cases as early as 600 BC, maybe 1000. These people were already getting trade items coming into them because they were important for them.
So these were going to be like your money. They had a value that you could trade for.
You could trade these things. And that's one of the things that, like I said, we still don't understand exactly how the marketplace worked. We don't know in some areas what they traded, how they traded, what was currency, what was valuable. We don't know, for example,
but you just know that it had to come from an alternate source,
Yes.
so there was some sort of trade that took
and
place.
the further away you were from a source of jade, then the more value these pieces have.
I would imagine.
And like what we have here in Belize would be granite or a kind of stone called chert that the Maya from here would then export out. And in fact, I recently found out that one site here in Belize called Kolha was a major chert workshop. They had about 36 workshops, and they sent chert out across the region. And so far, from what they can estimate, about 4 million chert items came from this one site.
Where is Kolha? That's not on my list of
Kolha
sites I remember.
is north of Altonha, and is in a region that has very, very rich chert. It's a great chert-bearing zone.
Chert.
Okay,
What does it look like?
yeah,
Slate?
exactly.
Chert looks like flint. So their knives and spears would have been made from chert.
Okay. You had mentioned that these were confiscated, and,
Yes.
and it's a good time to remind people of the antiquities laws. But, you know, quite frankly, Antonio, if I'd seen something like that, I'd just think it was an old button and worthless.
Yeah, a lot of people see these things, and you're right, they would think that something like this is an old
Hold
button.
it up so the camera can get it, yeah.
And I mean, they look like, well, this one looks like a much bigger button.
Yeah.
People would find this and, oh, a cool pendant, I'll string it up.
Yeah.
But you're right, people don't realize that these things are extremely old, and they're made from shell brought in from the coast.
Okay.
Anything that's over 100 years old is considered an antiquity, and it is illegal to buy and sell them.
Or keep.
You can keep them once you get a license to have a private collection. This helps us know what's in the country. It helps us to know where we stand in terms of artifacts. And you might have a truly unique piece that we might want to borrow and use as an exhibit. You're doing us a great favor by being a patriot, by saying, hey, we have this. We want to help build the history of Belize, because the history of Belize, in terms of the prehistory, the story keeps evolving.
Yeah.
And every single piece that we find and we get back adds to that. And if you're going to sell this piece and it ends up in the US on eBay where they sell it for 20 times the amount, we end up only having pictures of these things. The story is lost forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. So I see what you're saying in terms of being able to do more research and understanding the trade that used to take place. Tell us about the distribution of the sites in Belize. Like you pointed out, Kolha.
Yes.
See, I know the basic ones that we were taught in school. See, those are the
Lamanai, Altonha,
Lamanai, and you go from north, Ceros, and
Well, people only tend to think that we when I ask this in schools, for example, how many Maya sites do we have in the country, we have 15, and I tell the kids more. 20,
hundreds, right?
it's like hundreds.
more.
Yeah.
Hundreds, I'm like, more. We have thousands of sites.
What?
They're just undiscovered at
This,
this point.
actually, we have thousands of them that have been discovered.
Okay.
We probably have thousands more that we don't know of. And we also have to take into consideration that pretty much every single cave in Belize is a potential Maya site or is a Maya site. We had, there was a weak estimate of 1 million people living here during the Classic period. That could be even as much as 2 million by now. And these people had to live somewhere. But these places are still buried under the jungle, on their farms, and are sadly being destroyed by people grazing these things down for making farms. But these sites are out there, and these projects are good at going in there and looking at sites that people have no idea exist. Take Stan Creek, for example. People would think, you know, we don't have anything Maya in Sand Creek, but we do have quite a lot of sites in Sand Creek. And there's work being done at a site now called Alabama in Sand Creek.
And San Pedro, that has Maya
Yes,
homes.
and also on San Pedro, you look at Marco Gonzalez, you look at San Juan. The entire island was in itself a very important trading post, not only for the Maya of Belize, but for the entire Maya region.
That would be interesting to learn more about the Maya, the island Mayas, who probably were the ones who found those shells.
Yes, Marco Gonzalez, for example, was a major trading spot.
Yeah.
And apart from just trading these items, they also became a major workshop and factory for salt. And then when salt fizzled out, they went back to
salt was
trade.
also a commodity then.
Salt was very important, especially if you're looking at trying to transport seafood all the way inland. And people think seafood inland? I'm like, yes. Last year at Calpech, for example, where I excavate, we were several meters down and I found a small mandible of a fish. And I was like, well, this is interesting. And I posted a picture, and within minutes, people who work in Belize could identify that small mandible as being a parrotfish. And we're looking at this being at a date about 600 BC. How did they get it inland? It had to be salted. So we're glad that we have people who work in these different projects who may not know what type of architecture this is. They may not know what the glyphs are, but they look at animal remains specifically and can tell you this is this kind of shell, this is this kind of fish, looking at one bone and say, oh, that is white-tailed deer, and they ate this as a delicacy. So we learn all of these different things in one project, and it shows you just how complex the Maya were at this time. So if we're looking at regions, for example, you take the Belize River Valley, and you look at all of these sites that are along the river. Why are they along the river? Of course, access to water, access to food, but also access to trade, exactly, and transportation, which is still something that was done even when the British came, and then you have the emergence of all these Creole villages along the river. It was for pretty much the exact same purpose. And now we have projects that look not only at the Maya, but also look now at the first Creole villages that emerged along the way. And the Saturday after the symposium, there is the opening of a museum in Crooked Tree.
That's right.
It's the Crooked Tree Museum and Cultural Heritage Center, where Dr. Eleanor Harrison Buck, she started out looking at just the Maya.
Yeah.
But in her excavations, she realized that we have a lot of historic artifacts coming out. And so she said, okay, so we can't just ignore this part.
Yeah.
We also have to talk about what's going on here, and tying this in to recent memory and oral history of the village. So now we have this center opening up that will show not only Maya artifacts, but recent artifacts and things that people have donated that were still in their homes being used, but they realize the historic and the educational importance of these pieces to be donated. So you guys are, of course, invited to come out and check this out.
So that's Saturday, June 30th from 12 to 4. That's the Crooked Tree Museum and Cultural Heritage Center. And they say it's a deep history of the lower Belize River watershed.
Yes.
Now, taking us back to regions, I think that's one of the things that we can use to talk about the symposium. So we know the South. Obviously, people recognize the Quechua Maya of the South. We have the Yucatec and we have the Mopan. When you talk about the central Belize, is there a specific type of Mayans that we're talking about in this area?
In terms of the Maya of antiquity, that might pose some tricky questions. Because we know, for example, that down south with the Quechua, they moved into the area after they were displaced from Guatemala. When it comes to the central and north Belize, we have the Mopan and the Yucatec. And they live here now. We can trace them back to recent history, but the Maya of antiquity, sometimes we can't say for sure they were specifically this type.
Okay.
But looking at the languages, for example, I mean, Mopan is a branch of Yucatec. Quechua is somewhat different. So you put someone who is Quechua to speak with someone who is Mopan, and they may understand some words, but it poses some difficulty.
There'd be a language barrier.
There might be some language barrier. So what we have to look at to find out who these people were is to look at the epigraphy that is going on in these different regions. And we have people who study this. Dr. Christoph Helmke, for example, who works along with the Belize Valley Archaeological Reconnaissance. That's Dr. Awa's project. And he looks at the glyphs that are coming out in this region. And then you can look at the glyphs, look at the language that they were speaking at that time, and then trace it back to Maya of different region, whether they were Yucatec, whether they were Mopan, whether they spoke Chontal or Chorte, which is more highland Guatemala. You can tell these things by looking at the language.
Okay.
Because you can't just look at what they did culturally, because trade at the same time brought in different cultural things. If you go to a different Maya city and you saw the way they dress, or you heard their stories or their myths, then you bring these things to your city and you can influence them. Okay, I saw this over there and it looked great, let's do this here too. They were building this way over there, let's do the same thing here too.
Yeah. Okay. So tell us about some of the presentations at the symposium. Like, as an archaeologist yourself, which presentation are you looking forward to the most?
Well, I know that Dr. Helmke will be talking about epigraphy from Bacon Pot, which is in Cayo. We have Dr. Claire Ebert and Dr. Awe and other colleagues who will be presenting about Cajalpech. Dr. Buck will be presenting about Crooked Tree once again. And these are the ones that I find particularly interesting, but the ones that also people look forward to are the presentations by the Chases. They talk about Caracol, and Caracol being as massive as it was, people like to go for that one because it's popular. But then you also have work being presented about Shenantinich, which I think a lot of tour guides will gravitate towards.
Yeah.
And then you have sites that are lesser known, like Alabama, for example, from Sand Creek.
Where in Sand Creek are you talking about?
I'm not exact. I've never been there myself.
How did it get the name Alabama?
I think that came
Alabama
also
and Sand Creek.
from one of the nearby settlements that, to the best of my knowledge, was settled by Confederate soldiers from the U.S.
Oh.
So it also has that kind of history attached to it. But see, now this is the question you can come to this symposium and talk to Dr. Megan about and say, how did it become Alabama? Because a lot of people don't know these things. And this is not something that they may speak about in their presentation. But we like when the non-archaeologists show up and ask questions, because there's lots of people in the audience who may have the exact same question, but may be scared or shy to ask. So if you come and there's something you don't know, immediately as they're done, ask. We always say there's no such thing as a stupid question.
All right, so now we know there is a site being explored, excavated in Sand Creek.
Yes, and we have one that is being looked at in northern Belize called Aventura that was done in the past, but there's research being done now to see exactly how big this site was. And in July, they have something that is called the San Joaquin Festival that looks at archaeology from that particular site.
Right.
Yes.
So how do people go to, how do they register for the Archaeology Symposium? It's June 27th to the 29th, which is this week.
Yes. So you just show up. We start every day at 7:30. The table's open for registration. It's $10 for a Belizean, $20 for foreigners. If you're a student, of course, you register for free. Bring your ID along with you. And we encourage everyone to show up if you have an interest in history, if you have an interest in archaeology, if you want to meet these people, if you have questions about what they're doing and how it applies to us in Belize, because people sometimes ask us, well, why is this important? This is your chance to come and see why it is important and how this contributes to the never-ending story that is the history of Belize and how it keeps evolving.
Nice. 7:30 a.m. is registration time, and people contact the Institute of Archaeology if they want more information on the schedule.
Yes, you can still contact us today at 822-2106. Go on our Facebook, Institute of Archaeology Belize. Send us an email, call us. From tomorrow, we will be at the Sayanasa Resort Hotel, so we'll be shut down for the entire week. But come on out and see us, meet these people. It's the one time of the year we get everybody together who works across the country. So this is your chance to come out and ask all the questions that you want, and even how you can be a part of these things. One of the things that I do every year is at Cajalpech, I excavate, and we have Belizean students who work along with me. And I see it as being important because they're contributing to the history of Belize, and it builds their own interest in trying to protect the cultural heritage we have. So we're also inviting you both to come out, if just for a day, take a day off, come to Cajalpech in clothes that you don't mind getting ruined. Show up and dig, take your pictures, and this can be a special segment of Open Your Eyes on site.
Yeah, we can see the hard work of archaeologists in Belize.
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming in, Antonio.
Thank you.
This is such, if you look at the schedule, it's so packed with information. Definitely a great way to learn more about the work that is taking place in Belize. The 27th to the 29th in San Ignacio at the San Ignacio
Resort
Hotel.
Yes.
And it's $10 for Belizeans and $20 for foreigners and free for students. So do take advantage of it. We're going to go ahead and take our final break now. And when we come back, we'll have our wrap-up session.